They never wrote poems about her. No statues carry her name. She walked with no fanfare, spoke with no force, and yet Rome remembered her. This is not a story of crowns or battles. It's the story of a woman whose silence was more powerful than any empire. In the heart of ancient Rome, where marble kissed the sky and orators filled the air with fire, there lived a woman whom few noticed, yet none ever forgot. Her name was Livia. She was not noble, not a senator's wife, not the muse of a sculptor, certainly not the kind of woman history books chased. No statues bore her face, no poets etched her name into wax, and no generals toasted her presence. She walked through the city like a shadow, soft, silent, but unforgettable. Each morning, before the sky turned gold and before the city stirred, she braided her hair, wrapped herself in simple white linen, and lit the last drops of oil in her lamp. Her home sat in the crumbling edges of Siberia, its walls cracked by winters and its floors dusted by years. She had once shared it with Marcus, a farmer who left for Gaul with a soldier's promise and a young heart. He never returned. Only his name did etched on a plaque no wider than her hand, tucked into a corner of the forum. It was too small to be truly mourned, but far too large to forget. He left her a son, barely walking when the world seemed to fall apart. Livia did not cry, not in public, not before her child, and not in Rome, where tears were seen as weakness. At dawn, she washed linen by the river. By midday, she stitched worn sandals for travelers. And at dusk, she sold herbs by the shrines, bundles of rosemary, sage, and wild lavender. Never begged, never haggled, and yet people kept coming. Her silence softened the air around her. It lowered voices, eased tensions, and made even the loudest merchant pause. She wasn't loud or extravagant, but there was weight in her presence, something rooted and unshakable. Children stared at her not because she was conventionally beautiful, though she had a grace of her own, but because she seemed timeless, like marble before the first strike of a chisel. She didn't seduce with painted lips or silk garments. She drew people in by standing still, by enduring, by simply being present in a world that rushed past her. Then came the year the gods seemed to abandon Rome. The rain stopped, the Tiber shrank, crops withered, bread doubled in price. Fever crept through the alleys like smoke. Her son, now 11, grew thinner with each day. His cough deepened. Her coin pouch grew lighter. One evening she stood in the forum with a basket of figs that no one wanted. The marble beneath her feet was warm, but her hands felt cold. A magistrate's wife passed by, trailing violet silk and perfume, tossing coins toward another vendor with a polished smile. Livia received only the wind. No one spoke to her. No one saw her. Yet somehow they would all remember her being there. That night she returned to a dark home. The lamp had gone out. Her son coughed in his sleep. His face, pale under the moonlight, reminded her of things she hadn't dared feel. She sat at the edge of the bed, her back straight, eyes closed, hands resting still. She didn't pray, only whispered a question to no one in particular. Have the gods turned away? Is silence now my only answer? The next morning she did not rise to work. She walked. She left the basket, the herbs, the pouch. She left the path she knew. She wandered past temples she had never dared enter, past mosaics too fine to touch. She found herself at Palatine Hill, where power resided and names lived longer than lives. Beneath an olive tree sat a woman whose presence felt older than stone itself. Her cloak was the color of dust. Her hands were folded like parchment, but her eyes burned quietly like embers that refused to die. Livia sat beside her, saying nothing. Together they watched doves pick at the dry ground. After a while, the woman spoke, not loudly, but with a clarity that settled in the bones. You walk like a reed in the wind. You bend, but you do not break. Livia turned toward her, surprised not by the words, but by how true they felt. My strength is running dry, she whispered. The woman smiled, not with her mouth, but with her presence. Then rest. Strength returns in stillness. The world does not bloom in haste. Livia hesitated, then asked, "What if I fail?" The woman tilted her head with something like amusement in her eyes. You haven't failed, you endure. And endurance is not weakness, it is flame, and your flame does not flicker. They spoke no more. But something deep beneath Livia's ribs shifted, not like thunder, but like the earth quietly remembering itself. Rome had many powerful men, but very few ever noticed silence. Gaius Marcellus did. The son of a senator, handsome, educated, disillusioned. He had tasted every pleasure the city offered and found it hollow. One afternoon he saw her, Livia, in the forum. She didn't seek attention. She didn't wear paint or silk, yet something about her made the air go still. He returned the next day, and again. One morning she dropped a bundle of herbs. He stepped forward to help. She met his eyes not with softness, but with clarity. Can you tell rosemary from sage? He shook his head. Then perhaps you should learn to listen before you speak. She turned away, said nothing. But he came back not to chase, not to conquer, but to understand. He refused banquets. He read about plants. He stood from afar. One day she didn't come. He walked to her door, but didn't knock. Instead, he left a small bundle, a bottle of oil, a silver coin, and a folded note that read, "Even the strong need rest. If you allow it, I will stand beside you, not in front." The next morning, she returned to the market. She didn't speak to him, but she nodded just once, and Gaius, who had known countless women and countless moments, felt something stir in him that no conquest had ever given. It wasn't desire, it was recognition. So if you feel invisible, if your strength is quiet and your presence soft, remember Livia. She never shouted, she never begged, she stood. And in time, the world quieted just to hear her breathe.